Hello, everybody, and welcome. I have been asked by several people from all of my classes, to be honest with you, to explain what the heck is going on with the presidential election. And I think I can do that. The biggest problem is finding a way to explain it clearly, I think. And I know that you all have varying degrees of knowledge about how our system works. So I'm going to start at the very basic level and then move up. So if you know more than what I'm saying, please don't think I'm talking like a child to you, but just know that, this explanation requires some buildup, okay? So let's start with the most basic thing that we know about presidential elections. The first thing we know is that presidential elections have been, or have taken sometimes months for results. And in fact, in the very recent era, we actually used to have the presidential inaugural in March because they weren't always sure that they would know the answer to who won the election until January or February. Okay, so this is not new. The idea of not knowing on election night is not new. It's been new recently in the probably the past 2 or 3 generations because we've pretty much known on election night. But did we really? And the answer to that is no. No, we have no idea. What it is actually, well, we have an idea, but what it is actually is predictions, okay? Every election night that you hear so-and-so won, it's a prediction of what the numbers are going to do. So when Hillary Clinton heard the predictions in 2016, she realized by, I think it was like 10 or 10:30, that she should call and concede because it was just not going to happen. You can find various different, what they call paths to getting the 270 electoral votes that you need to get. And I'll talk about that in a second. Or the greater number of popular vote, if we had that kind of system. That's the simplistic way to think about it. She saw no way for her to win that election. I should say her advisors did. And so she conceded. And when that happens, that means that the other person becomes president. Okay, so we've always had concession speeches I can't think of a time when we didn't have a concession speech, but this may be our first. I think that Trump has sort of indicated that if he were to not win again, if he were to lose to Joe Biden, that he would not concede. And that's problematic on several levels. The first problem with that, and by the way, this is true if Joe said, I'm not going to concede. Okay. The first problem is that the very smooth transfer of power is extremely important, internationally especially. But you want the people of the United States, you want citizens in the United States to understand that this is not going to disrupt the daily events of things to the point that the government can't function or that there's going to be a big problem or you're not going to have a job tomorrow. Take your pick. So your life will resume its normal path whenever they change power over. And by the way, we have a long history as humans of, having very conflicted transfers of power, which is why our forefathers in the Constitution said we don't want that. I mean, from England, kings were killing kings and princes were killing princes so that they could be the next heir to the throne, So it was very violent a lot of times, not because there was a coup or because there was some sort of military action or necessarily because it was a dictator alone, but because people just wanted to fight for that power and felt that they could. So the forefathers said, we're going to make sure that we find a way to allow the transition to be smooth. And one of the ways that we do that is when we pick a president, we're going to pick a vice president so that both of those move out and 2 new ones move in. So that's why we have that 2-party or that 1-party ticket that you vote for both Biden and Harris. You can't vote Biden and Pence, right? Okay. So what we end up with is a smoother transfer of power. And then a third thing that they have to do is they have to have, if there's a, if we get down to the last 2 people running for election, as we do, because we only allow major parties for the most part, and they're the only ones who really get the vote. But if a third party were to get this would be true for them, or a fourth party or whatever, okay? It would be true for anyone. If you're in the top two, you have to have a plan for what's going to happen should you get elected. In Trump's case, yes, it's reelected, but it's still elected. So Trump and Biden both have to put out some sort of plan. Trump, a plan for transition should Biden win, and Biden, a plan for transition should he win, okay? Those things are legally bound to do them. All right. So if any of you have looked and seen that Joe Biden has a transition team and that he has a website for that transition team and it's public and you've gone, oh, that means he won. No, but this is something that he has to do. Does he have to make it public? No, he does not have to make it public. In fact, there's nothing on that webpage except him saying he's announcing the transition team. Or he has announced it. So there's not a whole lot of information that we have on that, but that is certainly not necessarily a telegraph that he knows he's going to declare victory. The other reason why smooth transition of power is so important, besides just internally and domestically, is internationally. Our allies need to know that we're going to continue to be allies, and our foes need to know that we're going to continue to be foes, or that our relationships are going to continue in the way that they do. I was running a joke with somebody the other day. I said, oh my goodness, if Biden gets in there on January 22nd, he's going to have a lot of work to do, because he probably will rejoin the Paris Accord. He probably will try to normalize relations in Israel and Pakistan if he can. So those things that Trump, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say undid. That's not even a word, but the things that some of his plans that he had were the opposite of what we had been building up to, particularly the Paris Accord. So we were in it for quite a decent amount of time, and Trump just pulled us out of it. And I believe it was actually the day before Election Day was the year-long waiting period that we had to have, and we are out of the Accord. So officially, we are out of the Paris Accord. The agreement is done, starting on that day before Election Day, November 2nd. I believe that is the correct date. So, probably more than likely, Biden will, as a Democrat, he has said he will do these things. He will rejoin the Paris Agreement and some other agreements, reinforce our relationship in NATO, things like that. So, I was joking that he's going to have way too much to do and he's probably tired. I'm tired thinking about it. But, if we still had Trump, if he gets reelected, we're going to just continue on the way that we are right now. So there should be a smooth transition of power no matter who wins. And that's important to telegraph to the international community that the United States of America is still stable, that you can still count on us, that you should still be our ally, that you can still help us out and you'll be doing it for the right reasons, and that there's not going to be some sort of big break between the United States and another leader. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, but we don't know what those exceptions are until you have a new president. So it's not something we can predict. So you just need to have a transition plan, whether you're outgoing or incoming. Okay. And that's it. Now, as I said, if Trump continues to be president, we'll just continue on the same way that we're going right now. All right. So that's why we always say that an incumbent is more likely to win. An incumbent is someone who's in the office currently. That would be Donald Trump. The president, if that's the incumbent, he is more likely to win than a challenger. In this case, Joe Biden. The reason being that an incumbent has had 4 years to show you what they've got, and you know exactly what you're getting. And so usually you get reelected. There have been a few exceptions, and even in my lifetime. I mean, George H.W. Bush, who, by the way, was one of my favorite presidents for various reasons. I was very young when he was elected, though. But I mean, for various reasons, I really liked the guy a lot. But, and I totally just lied to you because I voted in that election. And I did vote for Clinton because, at the time I was young and really liked the idealistic nature and the conversational style of Bill Clinton. And that's what Bill Clinton appealed to, this idea of George H.W. Bush was old and out of touch, and Bill Clinton was hip. He was telling us that he wore boxers and not briefs. Yay. He was telling us that, or he played saxophone on TV. He talked about smoking marijuana, but not inhaling. He did all the cool things. So he literally flipped the status quo on its head. And if you wanted that change, then you voted for Bill Clinton. But if you wanted George H.W. Bush to continue, then you would vote for him. And here's the thing. So, you're not really voting for a person at that point. You're voting for their plan. I mean, that's how it's supposed to be. We've really warped that. And of course we have, because the forefathers saw that coming, which is why they did some of the things that they did when they put these rules in place for the president. We'll get to that in a second. So what we end up having is presidents who are status quo and presidents who are going to change things, although we do need to know that it's not going to be so significant that we're going to go from a democracy to a new kind of government, or that, they're going to do something completely off of the American table, the United States table that we would want them to do. Because whether you're, a really strong conservative or a really strong liberal, apparently progressive is past liberal, and what is it called now? They're not calling it federalism. They're calling it libertarianism is further than conservatism to the right. Eventually, they just come back and meet in the middle. I'm having a hard time telling the difference between the really far progressive left and the really far libertarian right. But hey, that is a different discussion for a different class, right? We could talk about it in political comm here if you would like. But you can also Google online to find the different political views, and you will see what I'm talking about, that the spectrum isn't really a line, it's more of a circle. We sort of wrap ourselves back around. That is if you are in favor of the type of leadership that we have, which is a representative democracy, also known as a republic, right? So if you believe in that, there's a limited number of ways and perspectives that you can do that. So we end up just being in sort of a circle more than a line, even though we like to present it that way as if we're total opposites. We're not. We're all United States citizens. We all want the same thing for the most part. We have different ideas about how to get there, but we all want our freedoms. We all want security. We all want a good economy. We all want jobs, education perhaps. We all want these healthcare. We want these things. We just have different ideas about how to go for it. So that's what we should be voting on, and that is what we're voting on. All right, the Electoral College. See, I have to go here now, because if I'm going to explain today and yesterday and the day before that, I need to explain this. Okay, a direct democracy would have what we call a 1-to-1 vote. Okay, you have one individual, let's say myself, citizen, able to vote, and I go and vote. And therefore, whoever I voted for gets my vote. And that's the end of it. And whoever has the most votes at the end, which right now is currently Joe Biden. So we're like, well, why didn't he win then yet? I'm going to get to that. How did Hillary Clinton lose when she had 3 million more popular votes than Donald Trump? How did that happen? Why did that happen? I don't know how brief I can be about this, but I'm going to try. If you have any trouble going to sleep tonight, this video is probably going to help you out a lot. All right, so let's talk about what the Electoral College is. Now, in some view, mine is one of them. The Electoral College has only worked against one particular viewpoint. That would be the Democratic viewpoint. Well, I should say Democratic Party. It hasn't worked against liberalism necessarily or liberal ideas. It's just worked against the Democratic Party. I believe that is coincidence, okay? But in the 1800s and in 2000 and in 2016, we had a president elected who was not given the popular vote but won the Electoral College vote, okay? That has happened 3 times in our history, and every single time the Democrat lost and the Republican won. I don't think there's a conspiracy there. I just think that's that is just coincidental. But we could debate that someday if you want to. So putting that aside, why do we even have the Electoral College? Well, honestly, because Alexander Hamilton and several others did not think that we were smart enough to vote. And by we, I mean the general citizenry. Okay, I don't know how we would have tested ourselves or what we would have done. Back then it was white men who owned land. I mean, that wasn't that hard to figure out, right? Women couldn't vote. Anybody who was a person of color couldn't vote. Anybody who was from a different country couldn't vote, which is fascinating because Hamilton is an immigrant. Oh, wait, yeah, that's right. They all are. The only one who's not was George Washington. I believe I have that fact correct. He was born in what is now the United States of America. But everybody else, I believe that's correct. I might be wrong on that. I should check that. Somebody have me watch Hamilton again. All right, remind me later. The point is that we only allowed certain people to vote, and I say we just as Americans, okay? But our forefathers only allowed certain people to vote. These days we don't have that. The restriction that we have is that you must be 18, you must be a citizen. That's it. All right, that's it. We don't give you a test to find out if you're smart enough to vote. We don't do that. Part of that is because we believe that everyone has a say in our government. Even though we have a representative republic, we still believe that that is sort of, it is a democracy. So power must be dispersed. In other words, we have to have a decentralized government where power is spread throughout the people. And we do that in a certain way. We do that by giving the people limited power, okay? What I mean by that is, if you're paying attention, we don't elect or we don't vote in Congress, right? We elect our congressperson to go to DC and vote in our stead. In other words, they are supposed to represent us. That's why they're called representatives, right? And then we have our special 100, which are the Senate, is the Senate, and those senators, every state gets 2. And that's supposed to be the great equalizer. We have a bicameral government, Congress, and so we have these 2 houses. They're supposed to be equaled out. The 100 senators are supposed to know better even than the United States House of Representatives, which has, 435? Do I have that right? No, more than that. We also have to understand that in the time of the Constitution being written, in the time of our government being created, they did not want certain people elected. Okay, so they wanted to elect a certain kind of person, them. Okay, so they kept it that way. Now, over time, we have expanded who can vote, obviously. Beginning with people of color who were male. People of color who were male came before women, and so on. So we have this like tiered system, if you look at our history, of who got to vote when. And now we're at a situation where everyone can vote who is a United States citizen and is 18 years or older. All right, that's what we've got. All right, so what was going on with the Electoral College then? Well, as I said, they didn't think most people were smart enough to vote. So at the time, there was a really good argument to have the Electoral College. First of all, in the South, where there was slavery, there was a different economy based on a different agriculture than in the North. The North was still more service, believe it or not. It's still the same way. And the South was more agriculturally based. There were fewer people because they had to own more land. They weren't all shoved together like in New York City or Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, in those big cities. So if there were more people in New York and Pennsylvania, then they would decide for the entire country who the president would be. Okay? So in order to even that out, this idea of the Electoral College was born, and Alexander Hamilton used it as leverage to get control of the first American bank, the first federal bank. Why is that important? Because we're not actually united by much more than our economic system. Okay. I mean, we are in some ways, but more so now than we were back then in the 1800s. Okay. How do I mean that? Well, first of all, let's look at sort of, the disbursement of population. That is actually not really that big of a question anymore. The North versus the South, a state to a state. You've got California that has a ton of people. You've got Florida that has a ton of people. So it's not like one area is represented by one state or two states. Now, you may say, well, North Dakota will be represented by Colorado. Sure, but they're still in the same general area, because there's more people in Colorado than there are in North Dakota. Trust me on that one. I feel pretty good about that claim. Okay, so in order to get rid of that, what Hamilton did, and remember, he was only working with 13 colonies at the time, but what he did was he said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the population, and we're going to designate special people called basically electoral judges or electoral voters. And what we're going to do there, and I apologize, my TV's on and it looks like the Pennsylvania Secretary of State is speaking, and I have no idea what she's going to say, but it doesn't look like she's going to say who won, so who cares? All right, so he said for a certain amount of your population, you're going to get a number of delegates. No, that's not going to work. That's the House of Representatives, right? But that is how it ended up working, all right, and sort of. So each state got a certain number of delegates based on the number of people that they had. And the idea was that the delegates would see, okay, my people want to vote for Donald Trump, so I'm going to go vote for Donald Trump. And when I meet with my other delegates at the electoral college meeting, I guess, sort of saying, they actually mail them in. Then I'm going to represent my people, or you have the option to say, they want Trump, but no, I'm voting for Biden. That very rarely happens. There's some states that have outlawed that. And there's states that now say that if you win the popular vote in their state, you get all of their electoral votes. Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes. So whoever wins in Pennsylvania gets all 20 votes. There are two states that are exceptions to that rule, Maine and Nebraska. So you might hear them talk about like Nebraska 1 and Nebraska 2, or Maine 1 and Maine 2. And what that means is that they can split delegates. Their state still allows them to split delegates. So let's say, for example, a portion of the population votes for Biden and a portion of the population votes for Trump, then the corresponding delegates for that amount of the population will vote for those people or for that person. So you might have people from Nebraska voting for Biden and other delegates voting for Trump. You might have that same thing in Maine, but those are the only two states that do that. So when we talk about the Electoral College, what we're really talking about is people representing the voters who voted. So we vote, we go to the poll, it gets lumped in and given to a delegate. That delegate votes for us, and that's a way that we equal out the problem that they were having with the North versus the South. And that's as far as I want to go with that explanation, because there's a lot of technical stuff in there. What I can tell you is if you, I'm trying to think, I believe it's number 52. Somebody's going to yell at me because I probably got it wrong. But if you actually read I forgot the name already. I forgot the name. I'm going to cheat. Oh, there it is. If you read the Federalist essays, the Federalist Papers, if you read those, I believe it's number 52 that sets up the Electoral College. I could be wrong. I'm not a political science major. I did read them though. So what you can do is just go, you can actually Google that, look it up, which one talks about the Electoral College, and go read a copy of it online, okay? Or borrow my book, I guess. But we can understand how that was set up, not the why, but how. So I'm explaining the why right now. Somebody else can explain the how. I don't know how they came up with the numbers that they came up with. There are some super delegates, which makes them special most of the time they're former senators or former government officials. I don't know how they get picked. I think it's by the Illuminati. Totally joking. I'm joking. But I don't know how they're picked. Super delegates are sort of a secret part of all this, but generally, if there's a super delegate, they usually vote with their feelings, which may or may not represent the populace's, but it's supposed to wash out somehow. So basically what we're doing is we're getting smaller numbers, all right? Now, how did we come up with this idea of 270? What does that mean? Well, 270 electoral votes pushes you over the majority of votes that you need to win the presidency. You need 270 votes in the Electoral College in order to win the presidency. That means the number of states that you win the popular vote in, you hope has enough electoral votes for you to win in the Electoral College, because that's what's going to matter. All right. So anybody who says Trump was not legitimately elected, not true. He was totally legitimately elected. He was elected because the popular vote may have chosen Hillary Clinton, but when you translated that to the delegates, the delegate number, where she lost and where she won, did not add up to 270, and Donald Trump did. Okay? So what the hell does that mean for right now? Because we can debate whether that's good or bad all we want all day. I say get rid of the Electoral College. That's my personal opinion. But, I'm good with having the debate, and I wanted to explain it before I made any judgment. Okay, but the Electoral College does exist, and that's important. So right now I'm looking at the map, and they're showing these quote-unquote gray states, which are the states that have not finished counting the popular vote ballots. Now, you might be thinking, well, the popular vote's irrelevant, isn't it? Because it just depends on the delegates. Well, no. I mean, in Pennsylvania, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, I'm trying to think of who's still up. I don't think those, Michigan, I think, is done. Trying to look at Georgia. It's a little miniature map on my TV screen. So these places where they're talking about right now, especially Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona, and sort of Nevada, look at the number of electoral votes that those places have. Missouri doesn't have very many. Nobody cares if you win this state or not. Florida, California, Pennsylvania, Michigan, those are the big heavy hitters, okay? Even Nevada and Arizona don't have as many compared to those. But, right now, Joe Biden is supposedly at 253. He has secured 253 of the Electoral College votes, and Donald Trump has secured 214. Yeah, that math is right. Okay. So I think. So how is it that has happened? Well, whatever states have reported in their final vote tally, their delegate votes, their Electoral College votes, go to whoever won the state. All right. So Pennsylvania, why is that important right now? Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes. Joe Biden needs 17. So did I say that right? I believe that's 17. So I don't do math, people, which is surprising that I'm giving this lecture. If Joe Biden wins Pennsylvania, then he would win the presidential election and he would be president, because 20 plus the number that he has right now will put the 253 will put him over the 270 mark, and he will therefore be our next president. All right. Now, Nevada and Arizona, I don't remember exactly what their electoral votes are, but I believe if those two vote for Biden and Pennsylvania doesn't, then he will still win, because that's the way the numbers go. And so this is what we're trying to figure out sort of right now. I guess I'll explain that in a second. But that's how Electoral College votes work. And that's why that number 270 is important. But that is still why your vote counts, okay? Because I know some people say it doesn't, and it's hard. I mean, if you're a Republican, you're voting Republican here in Missouri, your vote is just washed out because everybody's Republican, right? There's a majority of Republicans here. The fact of the matter is that this part of the state has not had a Democratic representative since 1969 to 1971. That was a 2-year term. Prior to that, I don't know how long it was, but that was a long time ago because I wasn't born yet. Okay, so it's been a long time since there's been a Democrat who represents this part of the state because the people, for the most part, are Republican and have elected Republican representatives. That's the way that works. If I went to Seattle to tell you what was going on up there, well, if I'm a Democrat or a liberal, then my vote really doesn't matter because I'm with a bunch of Democrats, right? Okay, partially. So why do I vote in Missouri? Why even bother? Well, because as time goes on, the vote could change, right? And if I leave, or 12 people leave, or 3,000 people leave, that completely changes the political landscape of this area. Not one person, not 12, but 3,000 might do something, okay? So maybe. I'm not really sure about Missouri, but in other places where it's a little bit closer, I don't know how many of you are watching election coverage. I was telling my mom this morning that there was an entire piece on Beaver County, Pennsylvania, and that's where I lived. That's where my mom still lives. And it was like watching a foreign country because when I lived there, which was, oh gosh, it's been a long time. I think the last time I technically lived in Beaver County was 1997. So it's been a while. When I lived there, it was a solid blue county. There was nothing that was going to change that. Solid blue. Democrat in the commissioners, Democrats in the recorder of deeds, the people who file marriage certificates, the people who file mortgages, everybody was a Democrat for the most part. Not all of them, but most of them. Now it's blood red. I mean, it is deep, deep red there in Beaver County. It just flipped. When did it flip? 2008. Can I point to why it flipped? Probably. Do I want to talk about that? No, I do not. But Beaver County is right next to Allegheny County. And the reason that's important is because it's still showing as gray. And Allegheny County is where Pittsburgh is located. And generally in the urban areas of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, you find more Democrats than you find Republicans. Okay, so when Allegheny County, as a Democratic county, bled over into its neighbor county, Beaver County, and it's like north and west a little bit of Pittsburgh, of Allegheny County. So they pretty much voted with Allegheny County until 2008. All right, so why is that important? Well, people talk about counties all the time. You might have seen some of the politicos on TV talking about this county in Florida and what it meant and these tiny little numbers and why those numbers are important. Donald Trump got fewer votes than he did in 2016 in this one county. Why is that important? He's still winning it. Well, it's important because it gives you a layout of the values in that county, and therefore other similar counties may vote that way as well, and that makes our predictions better. Okay. I mean, are we making stuff up? Yes, we are, but we have some reasoning that goes in behind it. Okay, and that's what's important to know, is that if somebody makes the claim that it looks like Donald Trump is going to win in a certain state, they have reasons behind that. It might be tradition, it might be history, it might be the way the vote is coming out, the percentages in certain areas of that state, and so on, like I just explained with Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and there's like 3 counties around Philadelphia, one a little bit west of Philadelphia, and then you have Allegheny County in the far west of Pennsylvania. Those 5 counties are the most Democratic counties traditionally in the state of Pennsylvania, and they are the ones who have not been counted yet. So most people would assume that means that Biden's going to pull forward and he's going to win Pennsylvania. I don't know, maybe they're announcing that he didn't. I have no idea what's happening right now on my TV. So that's really important that people follow that trend in Pennsylvania to know who's going to win the state, because winning those 20 electoral votes is going to put Joe Biden over the president winning the presidential election. It will not make, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, he will not necessarily automatically be president because there's still other states out there, and he needs far more than 20 electoral college votes in order to reach 270. I hope that made sense. Now the question, why are they still counting votes? Due to the pandemic, which is a once-in-a-century event, honestly, due to the pandemic, due to other sort of systemic problems, a lot of the states, and the states control their voting, okay? How their voting happens, they control it, all right? They set their primary dates. That's why you'll see like 12 different primary dates for states. They set what the ballot's going to look like. They set, they can't set who's on the ballot because for a federal race, that comes down from the federal. But for their state races and their local races, they can decide who's on the ballot. If there's any ballot measures like Amendment 1 and Amendment 3 here in Missouri that were lumped into this election as well, because if you're at the polls, you might as well vote, right? But if you were doing a mail-in ballot so that you could protect your health or the health of somebody you lived with, or because like for me, or my nephew's going to college in Nebraska, but he's still registered to vote in Pennsylvania. He has to, he had to vote what we call absentee or mail-in, what we're calling mail-in ballots used to be called absentee ballots. And you used to have a really good excuse for why you needed to vote absentee. That was a thing for a very long time, but states switched, to a no excuse ballot, meaning that you could do a mail-in ballot for whatever reason that you wanted to do it. You just don't feel like going to the polls. You don't like walking. You don't want to stand on your feet. You want to use a different pen. Whatever your argument is, you can be an absentee voter. Okay. The reason for that, again, it's just the pandemic, honestly. And I don't know that we'll go back to only poll voting and you have to have an excuse for absentee voting. And here's why. Some people are going to say this is the most historic election for multiple reasons, and one of those reasons is the number of people who voted. Okay? Bill Clinton, because there were 3 people running for president, the independent, I think it was the independent, I'm not sure what party the third candidate was from, but there were 3 presidential candidates on the ballot. There was George H.W. Bush, there was Bill Clinton, and then there was, wow, really? I just forgot who he is. I want to call him Jeff Sessions because he kind of looks like him, but I've forgotten his name already. I remember his vice president was Admiral Stockdale. I'll have to look that up later, but you guys probably don't care. The third party candidate actually did steal votes from George H.W. Bush. And by that, I mean that people who voted for George H.W. Bush the previous election then voted for the independent candidate. That's really problematic because the third party candidate is not going to win. And not right now. We're not there yet. He's not going to win. So all he's doing is stealing votes from George H.W. Bush, which means that Clinton could win more easily. And he did. But Clinton won with less than 49% of the popular vote. That happened because there were 3 candidates and because most of the time we don't have everybody vote. Well, we obviously don't have everybody voting who can, but the percentage of people who vote, who are registered to vote, who actually go and vote, very, very small. Okay. But if they could mail in their ballot, suddenly people who are at work and have to go get their kids after work and don't have time to get to the polls, single mothers who can't get to the polls, or single fathers who can't get to the polls because they're working 4 jobs, people who are sickly, people who need someone to help them, you name it, people who are too poor to get transportation to go to the polls, people who don't know where they're supposed to vote, you name it. All of those things play into why there's such a low voter turnout. Now, some people would argue with me on that. Okay, they would say, no, that's not, I mean, it's certainly not the only reason, but it's a big part of it. Everybody logically can figure out that the easier it is to vote, the more likely it is to have more voters. And so in this case, in this election, we had 67%, I believe, turnout. That's huge. It's massive. Do I think that's good? I think that's good. You know, I don't care if Pennsylvania's counting votes until next week. I really don't. But some people have a real problem with this because it's new and different. I personally don't have a problem with it. I don't think like a lot of people I know have a problem with it, because the idea of more people voting means that there's more power in the citizens' hands, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So this is an historic election for multiple reasons. That's just one of them, okay? So what is happening right now in Pennsylvania is different from why it's happening in Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. Well, I think it's different. Pennsylvania gave everybody the ability to send their ballot in, and as long as it was received by, I believe it's November 6th, which is tomorrow, that their vote would be counted. That would mean that if some people's votes did not arrive until November 6th, which again is tomorrow, then it wouldn't be counted until at earliest November 7th or late into the 6th, I guess. Now, why is that important? Well, it just depends on how many people put their ballot in the box and the post office didn't get it to the election committee soon enough. Okay? Is that going to be a huge number? I don't think so, but if it is a huge number, then that could change the election. So we would have to wait probably like a week to get those results. And so if one of these states gives us results now and another one can't give us results until next week, that's fine, because that's the way we used to do things. Like I said, we used to have the inaugural in March, okay? That's the way we used to do things. But people are flipping out that, oh my God, you don't have to have your ballot in on the election day? That's crazy talk, except think about it. The post office has been cut. The post office is broke, and the post office could not handle that many ballots. Well, I mean, when they talk about ballots, they're talking about like hundreds of thousands at a time. And that's not even like the full spread of what came in. Now, why is it that we could call it today in Pennsylvania if votes may come in tomorrow? The answer to that is mathematical as well. They know how many ballots they sent out and what the expected number of return is. Whether they vote for Biden or for Trump, we know how many are waiting to come in and be counted. If the number waiting to be counted went 100% to one side or the other, would it change the election? If the answer is yes, then you need to count those votes. If the answer is no, then you don't need to count those votes. That's just practicality. They will count them. It will just be after our prediction of who wins the Electoral College votes. Got it? So when people say things like, if we don't get the answer on election night, then it's not valid, well, then no election's been valid. If people say, if we don't know on election night, we're going to be really upset. Okay. You know, when we started this experiment back in the 1700s and 1800s, it was months before people knew who the president was. And for one of them at least, well, I can't remember who it was or when they were elected, but I do know that there were people who did not know who was elected president, and that president died before they even found out. He was in like for 3 months or whatever. I don't remember that full story, but that could have happened, easily could have happened, because people did not get information the way that they do now, which is why it's very important for you to take my communication technology and politics class in the spring, because we talk about each and every technological innovation and how it affected politics in that time. And so how did we get here? Well, a while ago, when I was in college, there was a pretty brilliant political analyst. His name was Tim Russert. I brag on him because he went to my university. He spoke at my graduation, and it's called the Tim Russert School of Communication, which is really awesome. I like bragging about that, except you don't know who Tim Russert is. Tim Russert was the one who ran Meet the Press every Sunday morning back when he was still alive. And he did a very good job. Everybody really liked the job that he did. They felt that he was fair, you know, in talking to or getting the guests that he needed to get in order to have a good conversation. Well, he would also, just like Chuck Todd is doing now, he would also be the Politico, during election. And in 1992, I believe, I'm wrong on that. It wasn't until 2000. It was in 2000 he picked up a whiteboard that he had. Remember, this was technologically problematic to just throw it up on the screen. So he took a whiteboard and he had a dry erase marker and he wrote, Florida, 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 and he held it up. And I remember that very well. He was pointing at it and he was hitting it with his marker going, this is the important state. And he was saying that way earlier than we would have ever known. And guess what? Florida was the key. Florida held us up for weeks because and Al Gore and my apologies, George W. Bush, Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida at the time, so there were questions because the governor was the one making the decisions. It was a mess, but he was the one who called it. He said Florida is going to be the key here. I don't think he realized how badly it would be the key. In addition, he's also the one who created red and blue states. Red and blue states existed before, but way back in the day when they existed, the Republicans were blue and the Democrats were red. So it's a very confusing thing, but they got flipped. He called all the Republican states red and all the Democratic states blue, and that's where we get that from. That is a complete media creation within this millennium, believe it or not. And so we started talking about politics differently. And again, if you take my course in the spring, you'll understand how we communicated about politics differently. And it impacted not just the channel that we use, but it impacts the content. You should know this. If you look at a message in a political ad or a speech and in a political ad, or to Facebook or to Twitter, it just keeps getting shorter and smaller and more compact and less detail. Is it the same message by the time, or are we playing telephone, where you say the word and then it gets passed down and it's wrong by the end of it? Like I said, Darwin and you guys got banana or whatever. Literally, that's what happens with messages when they go through the media stream that way. So we have to be careful about that. But in 2000, red and blue states were a really easy way to talk about the various different states. And, again, he was using a whiteboard. So now, however, what we have is 20 or 30 years, probably more, but 20 or 30 years of you're going to know on election night who won. We're going to keep you up to date. We've got 24-hour news coming out in 1985-ish. What were they going to talk about? The election. 24-hour news cycle means you got to fill that time. How are we going to fill it? We started really going faster and faster and faster with the news, with what was coming in and what they were able to report. And that led to people saying that the media was lying to them, that the media was creating stories, that they were making stuff up, which wasn't true. It's just that when you only have part of the story and you present part of the story, but you don't have the whole story, then you're probably going to be wrong by the end, right? So you may predict Pennsylvania right now, and you could feel free to do so. He's the, Joe, I'm looking at my TV, Joe Biden is the apparent winner in Wisconsin. But only 99% is in. That's pretty good because the number of that 1%, I don't know what it represents, but it does not represent 20,534 votes. And that's the difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. So Joe Biden is predicted to win that state. Okay. So that is what we call horse race politics. The idea that we keep throwing out as much information as quickly as we can is called horse race politics. I need excitement in my life, so I'm going to watch paint dry. Literally, can you imagine? We're watching as votes get counted individually, I mean, in a computer, sure. But what are we supposed to do? Watch somebody slide it in, counted, slide it in, counted, because that's literally what they're doing, unless they're counting by hand, which again, okay, Biden, Trump. I mean, who wants to watch that? That's insanity. And the fact that we get updates 24 hours a day is ridiculous. These poor, I keep talking about Steve Kornacki. I'm like, that guy needs sleep. He's been running around with all these statistics. Nate Silver has just been blogging and tweeting all the statistics about who's going to win. You know what? We don't know, but we demand to watch it. And Donald Trump demanded that he know on election night. And no, you don't get to do that because of all the other things that I just explained to you. All right. So now we're all sitting here with bated breath. They've invented a new term. It's for something very real. It's called election stress disorder. I don't know about you, but some of us get just so stuck worrying about who's going to be president that we can't function. We can't work. I've caught myself doing this like 3 times today. Like, I was supposed to be grading something. I didn't grade it because I was like, oh, I've got to watch this. What do you have to watch? You're literally watching paint dry. It's silly. The outcome isn't going to change any if you're watching it on TV or not, right? So I just talked myself into getting back into it. But not everybody can do that. So the very real fear and anxiety of not knowing who your president is going to be. Now, right now, Donald Trump is president. He is president until January 21st. Done and done. There is no question. Whatever you think of him, he is our president until January 21st. So we have until January 21st to figure this out. But keep in mind, the media needs ratings, advertisers. They need you to watch. And so this is how they do it. The horse race politics, throw it out there every second, give an update, and let the people know what's going on so that they don't, they freak out more. So if you have anxiety about who the president is going to be, or you're fearful that we're not going to elect a president, or you're fearful that Donald Trump will not concede, or that he won't leave the White House, there's no reason to think about those things, just like there's no reason to speculate about who might win. At this point, whoever's going to win is going to win, and it takes time. Democracy is not quick. Democracy is a slow process. If you want, several 100 million people represented in an election, then you need time to count those those hundreds of millions of people's votes. They need time to do them. We need time to collect them, and we need time to count them. So here's the point. What's going on right now is a media creation of a very, what is a very tight race. Okay. Taking that to get everybody excited and to drive anxiety so that you'll watch your TV, so that you'll look at advertisements so they can make money. And honestly, that's part of it. The people who used to watch the Electoral College come in were politicos. It was never like the whole country would sit around going, oh, who's going to win? Now my text messages when I wake up in the morning, are from my family, and they're like, hey, did you see blah, blah happen? Why do you care? I'm the one with a PhD in political communication, not you. But now everybody cares because the media helped that along. Is that good? Is that bad? Again, a question for next semester in comm technologies and politics, okay? Which we will address all of those issues. In fact, you might get another spiel on the Electoral College next spring. I hope not, but you might. And so what's happening right now? Simple. They're counting ballots. And soon, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, we will know who our president is going to be on January 21st. Until then, we all just have to sit back, let the process play out, and understand that if we're mad at the process, it's the democratic system. And so maybe you don't like democracy? I don't know. Or maybe you think there's a better way to do this, a faster way. I think internet voting would be great, except, people have made really good arguments for why that leads to a lot more fraud. Mail-in ballots that we've been doing since the beginning of time. I don't know if you guys know this or not. Well, the beginning of our time. I don't know if you know this or not, but the military has always voted by mail. Always. All the deployed troops vote by mail. Okay? So it's not like there's massive amounts of fraud that happen with the overseas ballots. But they didn't come in until later. So What are we doing right now? We predict. What do we usually do on election night? We predict. Usually we predict an outcome on election night. We can't do that right now. The numbers are too close. Joe Biden and Donald Trump are literally right neck and neck, as they say in the horse race, right? Neck and neck. Who's going to get their nose across the finish line has to do with how many votes there are and how the math works out. So we're in a wait and see pattern, a hold pattern, if you will. And hopefully this explains to you what's going on. Is there anything that's going to change the outcome now? No. The outcome is going to be whatever the outcome is. No amount of advertising, speech making, or tweeting is going to change anything. The last thing I'll comment on is this number of lawsuits that Donald Trump has brought against Michigan and Pennsylvania. I'm not sure where else, but I know those two. Donald Trump said he was going to sue a bunch of states for fraudulent voting, something or other, all different stuff. I mean, in one state, it's that his people were not allowed to watch the voting count, which they're supposed to be able to. In Pennsylvania, it was they shouldn't be counting votes that came in after Election Day, which is weird because that's an arbitrary day. And it's something that they can change, especially in light of a pandemic and an affected mail system. Okay. And, you know, he keeps saying that we're allowing people to vote. I say we, as if I live in Pennsylvania still, that Pennsylvania is allowing people to still keep voting, but all they're doing is counting votes that were already made and sent in or done at the polls. So actually a judge has struck down all of his lawsuits in Michigan and Pennsylvania, I know for sure. He does not have a pending petition in in either of those two states right now. I'm not sure about the other states. I do know that he petitioned some of them. Okay, so my guess is that there's not going to be a whole lot that he's going to be able to do if he loses and he doesn't like it, because there is so much more that we do now to record what we're doing to make sure that nothing's fraudulent. There's checks in the system. And I don't really know that suing is going to help. In 2000, it didn't help Al Gore, you know, and he didn't sue because the government did something wrong. He was, complaining because they stopped counting ballots that were cast on Election Day in Florida. You can read up on all that. That was crazy, but it happened, and that's okay. Al Gore eventually said, for the betterment of this country, I am going to concede to George W. Bush. And that's what happened. Okay? So, deep breaths, lower your anxiety. What's going to happen is going to happen. I know we feel like we're waiting to find out if the asteroid is going to hit the Earth or not. I don't know. That's kind of the level of anxiety that some people are at. Like, there's a trajectory for an asteroid, and is it going to hit us or not? Let's find out. And you can sit there and wish and pray and calculate all you want. It's not going to change the outcome. We'll get it when we get it. Hopefully soon. All right. If you have any more questions about how this system works and the role that the media is playing in what's going on right now, not just because it's on TV, but how they've impacted the way we talk about elections, feel free to ask me or take my course next spring. All right. I hope you all are doing well. I know that you wrote your midterms. Well, some of you wrote your midterms and I have to grade them yet. I'll get there as soon as my anxiety lowers. I've been having a rough week. You know how it is, right? So we'll get those grades in soon. And like I said, I think half of them are done. For the other classes or for any outside community people who might be watching this, apologies for being in my living room, but you know, this is how we teach now. So I hope this was informative. I hope this simplified things and didn't make it muddier or more complex for you. Just remember, you vote. That vote goes with all the other votes from your area. A delegate says, it looks like Donald Trump won this area. I'm going to go represent Donald Trump. I'm going to represent Donald Trump. I didn't mean to put Donald Trump in air quotes. That becomes an electoral college vote. That electoral college vote from your state ends up counting towards him. And whoever gets more of those popular votes gets the electoral votes depending on where they are. Okay? And that's probably the key. If you have 20 electoral votes coming out of Pennsylvania, and you go and you get more people to vote for you in Pennsylvania than for the other guy or girl, guy or girl, man or woman, whatever, then what you end up with is a win if you get enough of those electoral votes. So how does somebody win the popular vote and lose the electoral college vote? They won the popular vote in the wrong states. And that's a whole other strategy we can talk about a different day. Okay, everybody, I'm out of here. I'm exhausted. This is a 60-minute video. I hope I can get it to post, and I'll talk to you all later.